the imposition of a levy on electronic transactions with the proceeds paid into the National Cybersecurity Fund under the administration of the Office of the National Security Advisor is still generating negative reactions from Nigerians. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu at the weekend directed the suspension of the implementation of the Cybersecurity Levy as provided for in the Cybersecurity Act 2024, recently unveiled by the Central Bank of Nigeria, to avoid overburdening citizens who are already battling economic hardship. Likewise, KPMG, a global firm that provides audit, tax, and advisory services, also raised issues with the timing of the 0.5% cybersecurity levy by the federal government, saying it is ill-timed under the current economic realities. In the same vein, Director General of the World Trade Organization, WTO, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, asked the federal government to streamline its taxes and levies, arguing that though higher taxes may not be bad, they should not constitute an undue burden on the people. The chairman of the Senate Committee on National Security and Intelligence, Senator Shehu Buba, said this cybersecurity levy was not targeted at individuals, but meant for financial institutions and telecoms firms, among others. Joining us now on this show as we look at the huge burden of taxes being imposed on Nigerians by the present government of President Bola Tinubu is Gabriel Osa, President and Chairman of the Council of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, LCCI. Good morning, Mr. Idahosa.
Good morning.
Good to see you again on the morning show.
Thank you. Thank you.
Where today is the cybersecurity levy.
Right.
The Nigerian government, the IMF, both said, yeah, it's important to pay attention to cybersecurity. The Nigerians are saying that is it by taxing innocent people that you solve that problem, and that in any case, as Femi Falana SAN has pointed out, Honorable Kingsley Chinda of the House of Representatives and Dr. Olisa Agbakuba have all pointed out that the timing is bad, the law is unconstitutional, there is a problem of misinterpretation, and that in fact, the law should be withdrawn, suspended, re-amended. And President Tinubu has now taken the step of saying, oh, okay, let it be suspended, and we take another look at it. Some people have praised President Tinubu for listening to the people. Some people have said, should the President of Nigeria be overruling the CBN? What does it say about the autonomy of the CBN? But I leave it to you to look at various dimensions of it.
Well, thank you. The arguments or conversations are at two levels. There's the micro level of the Cybersecurity Act itself. Then there's the macro level of how do you fund government activities. It's not really possible to begin to raise money for every little thing in government. To levy for cybersecurity, levy for industrial training, levy for insurance, levy for police trust fund. The whole approach in recent times of trying to have levy for every little thing is simply not the way to manage public finance in any country. The business of raising revenue for government is assigned to a specific organization in government, which is the Federal Inland Revenue Service in the case of Nigeria. It is the business of the Federal Inland Revenue Service mandated to generate revenue for all the services of the government, of the federal government of Nigeria. So that is the macro conversation, that the countries that are most efficient in tax collection are the countries that have the minimum number of taxes. It has been established during the work of the Taiwo Yedele Tax Reform Commission that the number of levies and taxes and whatever that you create does not translate into significant increase in revenue. It doesn't do so in any country. And in any country, the agencies in charge of activities like this, whether it is high-level intelligence, whether it's cybersecurity, are funded from the budget of the country. They are funded from the budget of the country. And the way they are funded usually is not a matter for public conversation. Nobody exposes the way the intelligence agencies of any country is funded. So these are the big discussions. The technical issues of whether this act is correct or whether it's unconstitutional are minor issues. I think the big issues to address is, should government of Nigeria encourage various agencies to be coming up with all manners of levies for every single thing? You want to improve healthcare, you have a levy. You want to improve training, you have a levy. You want to do cybersecurity, you have a levy. So I think that's the more important conversation, that there must be a concerted effort to improve the capacity of the Federal Inland Revenue Service to do the job of revenue collection. As we speak, not up to 40% of taxable persons are taxed. Not up to 40%. So the first thing to do is bring all taxable people into the net and then tax them efficiently. You don't even need to raise the tax. There are more than 60% of taxable organizations, corporate bodies, and individuals that are not paying tax. So I think that's where the conversations should really focus on. It is good that the government has suspended the cybersecurity levy because there were so many angles to the fact that there was all the matters of timing, propriety, and all of that. But I think the real conversation is, how do we ensure that the government agency that is focused on revenue generation does its job so well that we generate enough revenue for the various things that the government needs to do?
Thank you very much. So I'm going to throw that question back to you, sir. In terms of widening the tax net, we've talked about this a number of times, especially with regards to revenue generation for this. We know that we have a revenue challenge, especially as most of our revenue is going towards debt payment. Now, how would you, number one, the first thing I'll ask is, what are the challenges? Because we've talked about this many times, to widening the tax net. What could be FIRS's challenge in terms of identifying these organizations? Perhaps a more efficient system might suffice. But I'd like to ask you, from your experience, what are the challenges and how can we bring more people into this net? Just going back to what you've just suggested.
So the primary challenge was that for many years, thanks to oil boom, this government, federal government of Nigeria and even state governments, did not pay real attention to taxation in the way it is organized. Because the first level of taxation is identity, identifying economic actors at all levels, right to the remotest village. So that is the first thing. The capacity of the Federal Inland Revenue to reach taxpayers across the country was not built over time. In the recent years, with the dwindling of oil revenues, that capacity has been increased significantly. The government has invested in expanding the Federal Inland Revenue capacity. You are beginning to see FRS offices in many parts of the urban areas and the state capitals. But more than 60% of Nigerian businesses are not in the urban areas. They are not in the state capitals. They are out there in all the towns and villages in Nigeria. In any country that wants to actually collect tax, you have to go very granular. Every business that exists in every village must be taxed. And that is where the Federal Inland Revenue is moving now, slowly but steadily. So it's not a challenge in terms that there are any obstacles, but it's just that government, as a matter of policy, did not fund and provide the capacity for the Federal Inland Revenue to do that effectively until in the last maybe 5-10 years that capacity is being built. But if you take the size of Nigeria, it takes quite a while to do that across Nigeria. Before, the tax paying population was far less than 40%. We are now at about 40%. We need to move steadily, and it is happening. We can't get 100%. No country is able to do it. But if we can get, say, 80% of every taxable organization and individuals in Nigeria paying taxes, we will have enough revenue to address a lot of what we want to do.
Okay, let's talk about the challenge of taxation in the formal sector. But let's go back to this levy itself. I mean, you've talked about FIRS that are supposed to collect tax and all of that. But let's talk about all the confusion that went on with this levy. Is it that the CBN did not know that this law was talking to telcos, banks, and the likes? Why did they even put out a circular that it was going to affect us, our basic transactions? Is it that they did not know what is going on? And what is your reaction, to that cybersecurity level at a time where people are suffering, people are poor? You have over 30% inflation rate in the country. The currency has been devalued by over 100%.
Well, I think that's why there's a lot of talk about the timing and about whether, in fact, the CBN looked at the law thoroughly before coming out. It's instructive that the CBN has not made any comment so far, because clearly the CBN is going back and looking at it and say, okay, let's see, let's check. Did we sort of do our homework properly? At some point, the CBN will obviously make a comment, if not in the public, but to the key governments, the federal government, and the executive and the legislative. It is possible that a very detailed review of the law in the kind of detail we are now seeing was not done by in-house in CBN. It's possible. It's possible that they did that. They are convinced that what they did is right, but they don't want to react now. We cannot say what went inside. But because the levy came on, everybody went back to look at the law and say, what is in this law? Is it right? So at the end of the day, the point of law is almost understood now. The experts in the law have come out to say that. So we cannot fault the experts when it comes to the legal interpretation so far. But what perhaps is now important is the timing, that we have had so many, it's not double but treble or many whammies as Nigerians. We are hit from
back and
left,
center.
right. So perhaps this is a time to even slow down on legitimate additional pressure on Nigerians. Even if it was legitimate, even if the cybersecurity law was perfect, even if the way the CBN interpreted it was perfect, the argument is still correct that Nigerians are going through a lot now. And so perhaps we should get some breathing space before you bring on more and more. That's a good point. Nobody is arguing about that. But I think the point really is to deal with the big issues and the small issues. Because if you don't, in another month, another agency is going to come with another levy. And then you can come back to all these conversations.
So I got your point about the big issues and the small issues. But I asked you earlier on, what do you think of the spectacle of the president of Nigeria overruling the Central Bank of Nigeria? And it's already more than 24 hours since the president gave the directive that the CBN should reverse itself. Are we likely to have a situation whereby the CBN will ignore the president of Nigeria? And what are the implications for those fundamentals that economists keep talking about? Because I thought if the president of Nigeria speaks, whatever the situation, the CBN could have responded by telling us, okay, we don't agree. We are an independent body, and this is what we think we have done. And then, of course, nobody is talking.
Well, the answer to the first part of the question is obvious. The central bank is significantly autonomous. It is autonomous by law, and in fact, most of the time it's autonomous. But
most of the time, you are saying so.
Yeah.
But for some of the time, it is not autonomous.
But you see,
that's what you are saying.
In extraordinary situations, let's take a case of war. In any country where there is war, real war, the CBN cannot be autonomous because you have an unusual situation. We are probably not there. So the answer to your question remains valid. The president perhaps should not have made a public announcement or saying the CBN should not do this. I haven't even had the announcement. Probably it was made. It's more likely usually to have conversations between the president and the central bank governor in matters like this in a closed room where they have a conversation and they say, we think this is the way to go. So yes, the law is very clear. I believe the presidency is aware of that. But perhaps to stem a crisis, because this was going to degenerate into a crisis very rapidly, because of the fear that CBN would start implementation in about 2 weeks or so after the
May 20.
Exactly.
The deadline they gave.
So there was the fear that it may lead to another confusion, issues that might jolt the economy. And the president, perhaps made that as announcement. The media probably have evidence that he made a public announcement to the CBN. The answer is definitely not. It shouldn't happen. But if it happened, it's a matter of the exception to the rule. That's the way we have to see it.
All right. Now, after the announcement of the cybersecurity levy, a number of groups, including the LCCI, had released statements against this. In fact, to the DG, Dr. Almona, you had talked about how businesses and individuals are being overburdened by different policies. But I want to center on businesses. Because on one hand, we talk about taxes, that we should widen the tax net. On the other hand, people say, why should I pay tax? What is the government doing for me? I'm powering my own organization and I self-govern. I fix the road leading to my organization to help my business. What are the things, if we were to make a case for businesses this morning in terms of overburdening of businesses beyond, just taxes, what are some of those key things that are stifling businesses in Nigeria currently? Because for businesses to pay taxes, like you mentioned, not just levies like cybersecurity tax, they must prosper. If there's no prosperity, I can't pay taxes. So I'd like you to speak to that this morning, please. Yeah,
essentially, the big things that are stifling business are obvious. Power, for example, you need to have power to run your business. And then security of the lives of your people, the investors, the workers, security of property. Those two things, as we speak, are far below par. Everybody agrees that they are not being properly addressed. The other basic infrastructure, the roads, water, most of us, as has been said, run our local governments. We generate our own water, we generate our own power. We have our own private security. We clear the roads leading to our offices. But usually in this conversation, it's like the chicken and the egg. Should we say we shouldn't pay tax because government is not providing these facilities? Or we pay tax and then insist that government provides these facilities? So I think that's again, that conversation, that we have a democracy. If we pay taxes, then the government must provide those services. And we must use all legitimate legal and social action opportunities to get government to provide those services. Well, so first of all, we have to pay our taxes and then insist that government provide those services. Because if we take the other position of saying, why should I pay tax, or I don't pay tax, and government, because government is not providing services. So what do government to do? Government doesn't have the money because I don't pay tax. So how does government provide me the services? So the solution is I pay tax, but I use all legitimate options within the law to get government to be accountable. To say that I've paid my tax, I now have to have the services.
Let's talk about overzealous banks that have started really with these taxes and these charges already. What should their regulator, CBN, do to them? That's number one. Number two, let's go back to this attempt to overtax the system. It looks like a philosophical mindset of this administration. I mean, I and I were just looking through the papers this morning, and we're looking at a helicopter landing tax levy of $300. Anyway, that doesn't concern Dr. Abati and I, because we don't fly helicopters. It's for them that fly helicopters.
No, speak for yourself, Rufai. Because Dr. Abati...
Dr. Abati flies helicopters. It's part of them
I
anyway.
don't fly helicopters. People can be as pretentious as they want to be, so as long as they can pay for it.
So, truth has to be said. Every area you look at. And coupled with this, so we're also paying something called an electronic transfer levy that is being pulled out of our accounts. Anywhere you look, there's an attempt to squeeze, because we want to get a certain number, the tax to GDP ratio. Also, we're mooting the idea of increasing VAT, at a time like this, and a lot of people are looking, the argument is valid that we have one of the lowest VAT, but also the other multiple encumbrance taxes that we pay in this country. Now looking at the informal tax, because the argument they also make is that the formal sector is not taxed, but that's not true. What about the taxes the Agberos collect from the market women and things like that? So it's a potpourri of overtaxation everywhere. What do you say about all of this?
Well, thank you. That's why I was, zeroing in on the big picture. We don't need all these taxes, multiplicity of taxes. The Taiwo Tax Reform Committee, in listing taxes by federal, state, and local governments of all types, have run into hundreds, and more of them are coming. We need to change that philosophical mindset that you must raise little taxes here and there, and ensure that we have a very efficient, very, very efficient federal and state revenue service that generates enough tax that will far exceed the present GDP ratio that we are talking about, revenue to GDP. We can collect a lot of taxes just by improving our collection mechanism. We don't even need to increase the VAT rates. The reason being that because we are a large country, we have the opportunity of large numbers. We are 200 million people. We don't need to have VAT of 15% like Ghana that has only less than 40 million people. We have the benefit of large numbers. So we can enjoy our large numbers as a country and have a low VAT, but collect it around the entire country. So it is that big picture that will stop this pressure to have all kinds of taxes, road tax, helicopter tax, whatever. If we really do what the Inland Revenue is supposed to do, you are not going to have all this. In fact, helicopter tax, you go to the airport, you pay for a trolley. A lot of countries in the world, you don't pay for trolleys. The trolleys are all over the place because the large revenue collecting capacity in the system is able to take care of all these little things for which we are now putting all kinds of levies and taxes.
Okay.
Well, I get your point, sir, that the Office of the National Security Advisor should not be a revenue collection agency. There's a lot of hardship in the country. The government, the president particularly, has acted rightly by suspending the cybersecurity levy. We're waiting to hear from the CBN, whether the CBN would acquiesce or disobey or dismiss the president's directive, although you say there are extraordinary circumstances when a country will have to say, no, this is the direction. But more important is the point about ideological confusion. Taiwo Oyedele's committee recommending, 95% of businesses don't have to pay VAT if they earn 25 million or less. But you have, on the other hand, the federal government, the state governments, overtaxing people so that when people wake up every morning, they don't know what tax they are going to pay next. But thank you very much, sir, for joining us.